thanks
Yeah.
everyone for joining so far, and Lindsay and Sue, thanks for you know support and organizing on behalf of Renewed. So this is not the Weather Channel, as Sue just said. This is On the Offense again. Welcome back, many familiar people here. Um, um, uh, uh, on the Offense is a sort of 45-minute opportunity to have a group discussion with leaders in our association about how they're responding to their own particular business issues. And Greg Hart, who's very much involved in the founding of Renewed, I think has a particularly interesting story to tell, as you'll hear. And we initially started talking, of course, about the volatility around COVID, but of course, we've now had multiple cycles internationally and in the U.S. where there have been economic indicators that we're headed towards depression, massive inflation. So the volatility factor in our lives, I think, is here to stay. And part of the reason I respect Greg so much is PSMJ is older than Greg is, I think, by a couple of years. No,
Couple of years. Yeah. Yeah.
a couple of, yeah. And is in what I consider to be probably the most volatile market of any of us have to face, which is the architectural engineering construction market, loosely speaking. As Greg knows, I had some publishing interests years ago there, and 6 months before any economic downturn, the renewal rates on those products would just crash. They're the most amazing leading indicator. Those products were 5% of my revenue back then. They're 100% of Greg's. So to survive that long in a market that where bankruptcies and that sort of thing are very common during economic downturns is something. So Greg, thank you for doing this. It's always a joy to talk to you about what's going on. And when we did the setup call on this, we quickly got beyond issues of office vacancies and interest rates and economic trends. And what intrigued me the most is you referred back to the founders of PSMJ and sort of the founding principles. And some of that was sort of the traditional publishing, which none of us are talking about anymore. So would you mind just really quickly just running through some of those things and how they got you through COVID and have led to huge growth? You just had extraordinary success in the last 2 years, particularly.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no doubt. And thanks for having me, David. Yeah, I feel like we could, whenever I catch up with you, it's always fun to just sort of, I look back. I was just thinking this morning that I came from the architecture and engineering industry and came into PSMJ, or I was with a competitor for a few years before that, but I knew very little about the publishing business and events and conferences and all that kind of stuff, and crossed paths with SIPA back in, I don't know, 2013, 12, 14, something like that. And so much of what I learned, as much as obviously we have an amazing leadership team here in that first generation, but so much of it came from that brain trust of you and Lucretia and Ed and Tom and Heather, and all those household names, that there were so many little tactics and things we do that stick with us today. But anyway, like you said, yeah. So we focus on the business of architecture and engineering. So a lot of information, data, research, conferences, seminars, and also something that not as many Renewed members get involved with, but we have an advisory services business too, where we do a lot of consulting. And like you said, yeah, it's a boom bust business. I mean, all of our customers in some respect have that volatility, but yeah, the architecture and engineering space would be the great recession, the 10 year, or back in, I guess, 2008, 2009 was really, really a significant blow for that industry. Now, as time has gone on, like a lot of us have seen, our customers have gone through a lot of kind of transition and growth, and I'm definitely seeing a trend of them getting a little more kind of business savvy and a little more sophisticated to mitigate some of that volatility. But yeah, it's really true. When I look back to what's driven our success, certainly in the past 5 or 10 years, uh, there's that old quote from, I think it was Peter Drucker or something, that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And the idea was kind of, if you don't have a culture that's kind of leaning in with a bias for doing, then you come up with all the strategies and tactics you want. It's kind of pushing spaghetti. And when I look back at our success, that really is true. It always seemed kind of cliche to me, but there are some core principles, and I would argue the first and foremost one is almost more of an idea than a principle, but it's to never become this sort of glacial organization of highly paid administrators that's slow, that's bureaucratic, that's misses kind of important trends. Because I think all of us to some extent see it, but certainly in our industry, trends can pop pretty quickly, and become really hot really fast and really cold really fast. And when you have a lean entrepreneurial organization, and it's easy to say stuff like that, but I mean stuff like we hardly ever have closed door meetings, hardly ever. We hate closed doors, because we want everybody to be a part of what's going on in the conversation. We have a meeting every Monday morning with the whole company where we get together and just talk about what's going on, exchange ideas, and things we're hearing from our customers. And some of those ideas, we want to hear as much from the receptionist as we do the president, of what are people talking about? What's the buzz? But so anyway, at the most basic level, I think we really, really, really try to stay entrepreneurial, to move fast when we see a trend, and be first to market is wherever we can. But I think bigger than, yeah, there's some other principles. Certainly, trying to be a marketing first organization means trying to sell things before you create them. If you have an idea for a new seminar or a new publication or whatever, it's easy to get in the mindset of let's produce it, let's come up with all this content. But the hardest thing to do, and the best judge of whether it's going to be a success or not, write the marketing copy for it first before you produce a single bit of the content. Write the marketing copy, and depending on what the product is, if it's a seminar or something like that, you can easily promote it and see if there's even an audience before you start producing all this content and coming up with the product. So that's a big one. And some of the others are just try to always kind of focus on the value and not the cost of what we do. I think we all struggle with that with our own organizations, but there are little tactical things that I don't see it as much. But I remember several years back when everything started going digital, it was easy to say, well, the digital version should be cheaper than the print version because it has a lower cost. That's wrong. I mean, price on the value of the content, not on the medium that it's delivered in. So across the board, we've really price on value, manage on cost, of course, but that's another one that we've really, really, really tried to stick to for sure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's interesting because those are sort of some of those are traditional publishing ideas, like
Hmm.
you're saying. Um, it's mantras we used to repeat day in and day out, and they've sort of been lost as we've all moved towards high-end
Yeah.
site license kind of model a little bit. So I found it to be a really good reminder. But also, I think some of these things you're talking about. I think you also tactically practice those a little bit. We talked a bit about, okay, a daily meeting or a weekly meeting during the beginning of COVID, um, where you were fighting back against the idea of just sort of open idea generation that resulted in things you couldn't act on. So you were talking about, what are we going to do today? What are we going to do this
Yeah.
week? What are we going to do this month? Because we need another $20,000 in revenue. It sounded like your discussions were at that level. Could you maybe give an example or two of a couple of the things that came out of
Yeah.
that, or take this wherever you
Yeah.
want, Greg? But
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think in some respects, I think one of maybe, obviously COVID was devastating in so many different ways, but a silver lining that came out of that is probably for a lot of us, it brought us closer together as a team, and we had to figure stuff out when suddenly your conferences or trade shows or whatever weren't happening. You had to become entrepreneurial and innovative really fast. And I think it's hard, as we've all grown, as our organization's grown, you lose some of that. Yeah, that I love that like scrappy kind of newsletter DNA of just thinking very, very sales and marketing focused. And we really do, I guess you could almost say try to grow big by staying small, and that is, yeah, we want all of our leaders and all of our employees, everybody, to be thinking of new product ideas. How do we get it to market? How do we test it in the market quickly? And how do we see if it's a hit or if it's not? And obviously they're not all going to be hits, but they're very simple. In COVID, for example, lots of stuff that we looked at. What does the customer want from us? How can we help?
Yeah.
David, you actually, one of the quotes from you, which was just, I think it was just in some conversation of passing years and years ago, was I think you called it kind of the two beer rule or something like that. That whatever your customers are talking about over two beers, two coffee, glass of wine, whatever, that's what you want to be on top of. And in COVID for us, it was, return to office policies, remote work policies, things like that. And the faster we can kind of put together a compilation of those, and produce webinars and content on those topics, uh, the more successful we are, and the more we're adding value for our customers. So yeah, that's those sorts of things pop during COVID, that we just said, what's the challenge, what do they want from us, and how do we get it out there quickly? And we
Yeah.
still, even though the pressure of COVID is off, uh still try to always think that way in terms of how can we help,
Yeah, did just that one example you cited of you have the 8 a.m. meeting and it's like, let's pull together return to work policies and put it
Yeah.
out. I think you said you were in the high five digits on revenue on that product during a period where we were all a little afraid of what checks were going to show up or if they were going to show up at all. You also
Yeah.
you also did the same thing in a bunch of areas that most of the people on this call have looked at. You launched an AI in the AEC industry
Yeah.
conference
Yeah. So
that
fast forward 2024, it's like the same,
yeah,
it's that same concept of AI is a great example of a topic that came onto the scene quickly, and you could quickly become an also ran if you wait a year to figure out what content you're going to produce on that topic. So yeah, we did a conference in June that was our biggest conference in probably the past 10 years, on AI and innovation, that came together in not even 6 months. But we just let our customers tell us where they wanted us to take it, and what they wanted us to cover. And we still, webinars and things like that on AI. It's just we just still, that again, it's that entrepreneurial culture of what do the customers want? What are they struggling with? Sometimes what they want and what they need are two different things. And I think that's a common mistake too, that we can convince ourselves that they need a certain thing, but if
yeah,
they don't want it, they're not going to buy it. There's that old adage of, if people bought what they needed and not what they wanted, the McDonald's would just sell apples and salads. But so you got to focus on that too, in terms of like what are they really. Sometimes you have a great idea that you think they need, but they don't want it. In fact, proof in case in point, we actually produced or this is probably a case where sell it and then create it was worked really well for us, because we had an idea for a tech conference like that several years ago. I think it was like just before COVID, and produced the marketing copy and put it out there. And looking back, it was spot on talking about AI and things like that. But it was before its time. Nobody wanted to go to it because it was just such an abstract concept. Nobody was ready to talk about that stuff.
and
But
then
then
in
you hit it
2024 it was a huge hit. Yeah.
because they needed it then, but they didn't want it. And then in 2024, they certainly wanted it. Yeah.
Could you maybe just because I think we're all, you know, relatively speaking to most businesses in the US, we're pretty nimble and renewed, but we're also facing our own bureaucratization at various points. You talked a little bit about the culture of the leadership team and how you use that, and we probably don't have enough time to go back to that, but there's a lot more to talk about there. But could you maybe just also, in the traditional publishing model, the other the big parts are now sort of the tech, and then the sales and marketing parts. Um, and I should mention, while you're doing this, you're also having a founder transition with Frank, and people are sort of the founders are sort of changing their roles, and you end
Hmm.
up with a new job title in the midst of that. But so between the transformational issues, the sales and marketing issues, and the technology issues, how do you manage to keep nimble with all that going on? Because you've got a big
Yeah.
organization now, you know.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a good question because yeah, there is a kind of a confluence of a lot of things going on, and that a lot of this tech stuff, it's not just yeah, impacting our industry, it's impacting everybody. But um, we also have a very strong kind of market for our customers right now, a lot of infrastructure spending and things like that. And then yeah, like a lot of our customers, a lot of our own organizations, we're going through sort of this transition and expansion where, yeah, we had that first generation of amazing entrepreneurs, and you mentioned Frank Stasiewski, who founded PSMJ, who's still involved today to some extent. Just a fascinating entrepreneur. But yeah, it's kind of you watch companies go through life cycles, right? I mean, there's sort of founder mode, and then you reach a point where it kind of moves on to almost I call it maybe management mode, but that's not the right term. It just becomes more institutionalized, in terms of you
Yep.
still want to be nimble, you still want to be all that stuff, but at the same time, you reach a size where you have to have a little bit of structure to get the most value out of your team. I mean, an example of the entrepreneurial nature is we hate job titles. We really do. I think in a lot of ways, job titles give people excuses what not to do, and we really try not to get into sort of what's your obviously people have job titles, but we really don't emphasize that very much and try to keep roles pretty broad. But yeah, I mean, as you grow, you have to get a little more structured. But we still just want to keep all of our managers really close to our customers and not becoming too removed. And there's, like with a lot of organizations, there's so many opportunities to with our conferences and virtual program and things like that. And, just if you're out and about to just sit and meet customers and talk to them and hear what's going on in their business, the more we're all doing that, the more we'll always stay locked in and dialed in and a few steps ahead of the competition for sure.
Yeah. Technology, sales and marketing.
Yeah.
What are you working on now with those two critical parts of your success? You know,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Sales and marketing is probably the one where kind of there's the most evolution, I think, over time. I think there's still, honestly, a lot of the basics of content marketing still hold true. If you're pushing out content that in some cases is controversial or contrarian, or at the very least useful, um, you're always going to have an audience, but that's gotten harder. I mean, certainly, some of the strategies in digital marketing and things like that have evolved quite a bit. And again, I don't know, sort of like the basics of that we've always talked about. It's test, 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 and we try different strategies. Our sales, we're not really heavy on the sales function per se. We're much more of a marketing organization than a sales organization. But obviously, in certain pockets of the enterprise, you have salespeople who are focused on certain things, and even then, we try to really create a culture that's um, much more about helping first than selling, and much more about relationship building, much less transactional. Where we have that on the tech side, I mean, that's always a challenge, and I think it's probably more so now than ever in terms of you can get on such a rabbit hole of spending money on tech that you've got to kind of pick your battles there. But that's exactly, I think, what our strategy is to kind of pick our battles and look at where there's maybe a bottleneck in terms of either it's back end kind of CRM, ERP type stuff, or
you know,
or customer facing, member portals and just always kind of thinking in terms of minimum viable product and that sell it first, create it second. If it's a customer facing product like the network for our membership community, what do the members want? Let's let them take us where we think it should go, and not us to go down
yeah.
some tech rabbit hole that may or may not be the right way to go.
Yeah, one thing I think that I maybe you've been better at than a lot of us is for years we used to sort of battle the idea of investing as if we were a tech company. So, like if you're SAP or Google, obviously their product is the technology
Yeah.
platform. We're still fundamentally publishers. But I would say, certainly now in the companies that I'm most involved with, including BVR, obviously, the tech has be maybe you could say have lost that battle. Tech is now
Yeah.
institutionalized. It's not like, okay, this year we're going to spend 14% on tech development, but next year it'll go down to 5%. Very few
Yeah.
people are thinking that way. But so I think what you're saying is a good reminder, not to be cyclical about your tech, but to be simple, focus on what's really critical, get those changes done. And and I empathize because we're going through,
Yeah.
we're near the end of a huge cycle of that now, of completely changing the way our customers interact with our data and our content and our training. And so you've been good about that in maybe a more cost conscious way than some of us.
I guess. I mean, there's a tech wish list that's as long as your arm, I think, and we just kind of sort of I don't know. There's some stuff where maybe we were laggards, some stuff maybe we're a little on the front end, but we
Yeah.
it's just pick your battles, I guess, on that. I'm a little more of the, it's just on a call with our CRM account exec yesterday about an add-on product that can help with some of the commerce stuff. And you just always have to, these costs are like, this plus this plus this plus this plus 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 plus. And you just always have to be looking at the ROI. And I probably say no to a lot more stuff than I say yes to. But hey, look, maybe that's the right move, maybe it's not. I don't know. But yeah, that you're absolutely right that the tech somebody, I don't know, it was one of the BIMS conferences or something years and years ago. I remember it said something like you're a tech company, you just don't know it yet. And there's probably some truth to that. Excuse me. Um, Especially, and again, that was probably pre-COVID, but now yeah, a lot of us are much less publishers than we are tech companies. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Could you the yeah, trying to back down from that, or I think the best way to approach that is sort of more the short to midterm planning, like 24-month planning, sort of say, here's the pinnacle we're trying to get to with our tech investment. Uh, because, just at the P&L level, if you're accustomed to, say, running 8% investment in tech, and then you spend 3 years running at 20%, that's a lot of profitability you got to find somewhere else. That's a lot of handbooks about return to work. You got to throw a lot of product into the market to fill that gap.
Yep.
So
Yeah,
yes.
it's tricky too, I think, with that because some of the customer facing tech investments almost by definition excuse me, have to fly in the face of that notion of sell it first, create it second.
Yeah.
You could do that,
Yeah.
but it's called vaporware, and it's probably not a road you want to go down. So, that's the thing that I think culturally is hard sometimes. Is you can, yeah, make some of these big investments that kind of you won't know until you kind of go to market.
Yeah.
Whether there's something there, and again, whether it's a customer facing or kind of back end, yeah, you end up the expense oftentimes comes before the revenue on those, which can be a little scary.
Well, maybe one, because there we talked about a lot of the sort of successful introductions you did, um, and including a lot on the fact that you have a very deep and rich consultancy part of your business. I think it's like a fifth of your revenue and includes M&A, but you also do a huge amount in equitable compensation and leadership compensation. Like you own the market in that for AEC, and then you do M&A consultancy. So that I think that part of the business helped get you through some of these cycles. But um, the other thing I wanted to ask you about that you also did a few years ago was PSMJ Pro, which is like all of us, a membership model for your elite customers, as it were. Um, so I wondered if you could just describe what you came up with in that model and where that is now, like sort of the pricing, who was allowed to join, what the structure was,
Yeah.
any specifics about that you want to share, and then
Yeah.
also anyone who wants to put in a chat question or raise their hand, to join the discussion, please jump in whenever you're ready. But anyway, great. Just the
Yeah.
PSMJ Pro. Could you describe
Yeah.
what you?
And you actually touched on a part before that, the advisory services, which kind of plays right into it. And that is
Yeah,
at the most basic level. There's two ways we can create value for our customers. One is by offering our own advice and expertise, standing on our soapbox, so to speak, and that's certainly what the basis of any advisory services practice is. Like you said, yeah, that covers strategic planning to merger and acquisition, business development, every business facet of running an architecture firm. We have an advisory service practice on that. So a whole bunch of opportunity there to stand on the soapbox. That's value pathway number one. Value pathway
yeah,
number two is to be a conduit to bring our customers together and let them talk to each other and share best practices with where we just kind of, stay out of it. There's not going to be as much, I don't know, disruptive or contrarian thinking and that kind of stuff, but there's still a lot of value in that. So PSMJ Pro is and this is the exact trajectory of so many renewed members that it ties back to our original product that started the whole company was the Professional Services Management Journal. Like a lot of us, there was a subscription-based publication that everything else was built on, and that was it. And obviously, fast forward to 2024, candidly, fast forward to even 2015, and that or 2010 maybe even, and that world started to change quite a bit, and we started to look at what's the it's funny because you look at the customer and you see how they're getting younger, or maybe it's just that we're getting older. I don't know, but there's a lot of next generation executives and customers coming into the fold that want to consume information in a different way and want more kind of real time interaction with each other. So yeah, we created this. We kind of built on. I shouldn't say created. We added on to the newsletter, what started out as just a discussion forum. In fact, it started out as a listserv,
yeah,
a classic old school listserv uh, between members, and then now morphed into more of a traditional kind of portal where you go in and it's sorted by topic and all that kind of stuff. And that just lit up now of people asking. We're probably in a little bit of a unique position where even with our customer base and the architecture engineering side, even if they're direct competitors, they're still very open to shit. It's sort of like our community in Renewed, right? I mean, not many of us are direct competitors, but always very open to sharing ideas on what's working and what's not. So it first became that, we added the discussion forum piece and again, following the typical trajectory, added some special reports and things like that. And then what really took it to the next level was in 2020 when COVID hit. We added, I don't know, it's sort of like this almost. It's a monthly uh, uh, executive kind of discussion forum where and in fact, the one this month is this afternoon at 1, where sometimes I'll talk about a specific topic or some things that we're seeing. Oftentimes I'll have guests come on who might be a CEO or whoever in an architecture engineering firm that's doing something kind of unique, and things like that. One of my future guests I want to have is a guy, I met his wife at an event where 75-year-old architect who has 75,000 TikTok followers, talking about like everything from just gripes of life of an architect to sometimes technical, something about building flashing or something like that, but just unique things that we happen upon along the way. And that really took it to the next level because now that mixed the kind of value number two, which is getting them talking to each other, with value number one, which is us sharing kind of soapbox stuff. And it's also an opportunity. I don't know, probably half the time when somebody asks a question in the discussion forum, it's something one of our experts can chime in on as well. And
How
it could be
many
leads for the advisory services. Yeah.
how many people do you have in the PSMJ Pro model now? Is it
It's
like
about it's about 2,000. I think it's just under 2,000 right now. And it's a mix. So you asked about the model as well. I mean, it's a mix of some group memberships. I mean, by definition, we serve an audience that's very fragmented. It's a lot of small organizations. There's sort of a handful of big, 10, 20, 50,000 person companies, and then a whole bunch of 5-person, 8-person, 20-person companies. So it's a mix. There's some groups and there's some individuals. Um, we've tried to kind of keep it a pretty broad audience up and down the org chart from sort of like CEO to project manager. And there's different persona groups. There's one on project management, one on technology, stuff like that. Um, doesn't require a whole lot of moderation. They behave pretty well in there. And it's also a great chance for us to just catch that two beer, what they're talking about. I mean, that it's happening in real time
whoever it
right in front
was?
of us, right? So
At some
it's
point,
a
it evolved to two martinis. I don't know when that
two more.
happened, but it
Well,
didn't
they
get
all
any
get more
nicer at
sophisticated
that
over
point.
time. Yeah.
Yeah,
But yeah, so it's not a super sophisticated model. I mean, there's other um some other benefits. They do monthly uh meetups, if you will, where there'll be a meetup on HR or small organizations, things like that. And that's just a Zoom meeting where 10 people might join one, 40 people might join one. They get together and talk. And then there's also pop up if there's a hot topic, something's a buzz in the discussion forum. Our executive director there will just create a quick pop up. Hey, let's do a meetup next week at 11, and people can share some tips and tricks. And we do some other little perks for the members. I think the key with that network is to really I think it's easy to get kind of membered. I don't think a lot of people wake up these days saying that what I need is another membership to something.
yeah.
But it's that network piece. It's the executive network piece that I think is really valuable.
By the by the way, this is a little bit off the point, but I know a lot of us on this call, particularly those with events, have become fans of the Net Promoter Score thing. There, maybe a couple of you on this call heard, but there was an interview with that guy on NPR yesterday, begging people to stop surveying their customers because he said it's gotten so out of hand. The would it, would you refer my that was essentially the question he
Yeah.
invented, would would you refer new customers to us, that kind of thing. And he was like, it's out of control, it's insane. But I think the same thing with the membership model. We have to be really careful that it hasn't gone to the three martini thing. I think he literally said that. So he said two glasses of wine is okay. Three is not good when it comes to surveys or membership organizations. So
Yeah. And that's
um
that's another funny and that is really true, by the way. Yeah, whether it's your primary care physician getting your car service, you're getting these emails and text messages about how do we do kind of thing, which does create survey fatigue. But it also
yeah.
is another. You can't see it from here. I should have grabbed it. I have this giraffe out on the counter outside my office. This sort of porcelain giraffe, and the purpose of the giraffe is Frank had put it there for all of us to remember, never be afraid to stick your neck out. And the idea is if everybody's going there, then you should go over there, and that's right. When everybody starts going heavy on everything's a membership and all that, then do the flip side of that. Find out what nobody's doing and go over there. And that's probably, I mean, you and others from day one with the newsletters, I think have known that.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, well, especially, I think it's become even more true in the big tech world we live in now. You know, you know, for 5 years, nobody could say anything that didn't have big data in front of it. And in
Yeah.
this group, we're all saying we're doing small data. That's why it's like, I'm not going to compete with the big data people, but we're too small for them to care about us. So,
Yeah.
look, could I ask this? I want to ask you because one area of your revenue streams has been very important in the history of your company is your survey data. We haven't talked about that specifically, so maybe I want to ask you one question about that, and then we can lead into what Ed's posted, just and which might take us to the end of this discussion, and other people can chime in. But the we are generally speaking, most of us are moving away from products more to like the pro model, like you said,
Mhm.
or in our at BVR, we've been using the term pantheon for sort of where all the content comes together in a higher price, you know, theoretically at some perfect point in the future, single you know, price model, which, as we know, the tech companies and the big data companies are all at that point. Cap IQ in our market,
Yeah.
$20,000 a seat. That's their only pricing point, or whatever. Let's just as an example. Have you done anything there? Because you really had the firm economics data, the compensation data, all the other parts of that data system. Have you made any move to have PSMJ Pro, all data, or and then let's go
We
to Ed's
have,
question.
yeah. The compensation data we've moved to kind of you can still buy the products a la carte, but there's also a benchmarking suite that's a subscription
Yeah,
based product, and the reason for that was largely um you know uh, post COVID. There was this when we were in sort of this peak inflation and particularly compensation wage escalation. Annual surveys were quickly, it just wasn't enough. We needed data.
yeah.
I mean, there was, for our customers and our audience, they're dealing with cost escalation clauses in their contracts, and they need more timely data than data that could be, 8, 9 months old. So we started adding some quarterly inflation adjustment resources and wage escalation reports and special reports and things like that. So it just naturally lent itself much better to access to this ongoing suite of data rather than kind of pushing out individual products. And the reception was very positive to that. By and large, most folks purchase access to that subscription suite than an a la carte product on the
Well,
comp stuff. Yeah.
would
So
you say, like, is that like 60% moved
oh
up,
yeah,
kind
I'd say it's probably at least 60, maybe 70%, something like
of?
that.
Well,
Um,
well,
because we've sort of I think the value proposition is just crystal clear that when you see these the ability to kind of use that stuff in real time and get much more
yeah.
timely kind of comp adjustment stuff.
How did you handle the pricing adjustment as you added the currency hook to your, and these are products that have been around
Yeah.
forever, that everyone loves, that are very well known and everybody depends on. Was it
Yeah.
like 2x or 1.5x or?
Yeah, at least so number one, we definitely didn't want it to be kind of this bulk discount sort of thing. As largely because with a product like that, there's not a ton of price kind of elasticity. Somebody's
Yeah,
not going to say, "Well, I'm going to buy it at $500, but geez, if I get it for 10% off, yeah, they either need the data or they don't, right? I mean, there's not a lot of
same
demand's not
for
going to
us.
change much, right? So, and like I said, there's some inflation adjustment factors that I think is updated quarterly, as well as some of these special reports on year-end kind of pay raises and things like that are products that aren't available a la carte. I mean, those only come in the suite. So it allows you to be pretty aggressive in articulating the value. So it was at the very least not a bundle discount. And yeah, I think I want to say an a la carte survey is I think $600, something like that, in the off the shelf price of the suite is 3,000, something like that. So it
Gotcha.
it
Well,
allows
well,
us to really, again, back to that principle of price on value, not on cost. And that's
yep.
data that's high value data that again, as long as we're delivering that value and we're dialed into what other stuff we can add to it to command value, then yeah, the market response on that's been very positive.
From my own issues in my own business, that comment's very inspiring, Greg. Thank you. You know, reminder, you know, reminder to do product evolutionary planning where you're not aiming for a 5% increase. You're aiming for, what did you just say? A 600% increase. I like that. I like that.
Yeah.
So,
And
yeah.
it's you got to know, the products that again there isn't a whole lot of elasticity with, and where you can get more aggressive, and there are other products where you can't do that at all. So
Yeah.
you gotta
Yeah.
understand the product a little bit. Yeah.
So Ed, I'll pass that on. A good summary question from Ed. So if you want to jump on, yeah.
Yeah, sure. I mean,
Yeah.
Greg, first, on behalf of everybody, thanks. Great conversation here that I've enjoyed eavesdropping on.
Yeah.
But so just, Greg, you've talked about so many things, but what I don't have a sense of is, what were the things that really moved the needle for you here? I mean, if you said, well, it was sort of little bits on, 25 things, and that's
Yeah.
one thing, but usually there are a few that really kind of stand out as like, oh, yeah, that did it. And I'm wondering if you can share what
Yeah.
those were.
Yeah, definitely PSMJ Pro is for a whole, not just for the direct revenue pathway, but again, just an easy way to kind of have a focus group at your fingertips has been a great opportunity for us. Another thing that has really held true, I remember, I don't know, years ago, Tom Gale had mentioned to me one of the things he loved about conferences is when you have a conference, it provides this like 10 or 20% lift across the company. That is your team's just like morale and energy of coming together, but as well as just, customers now interested in other products and services and things like that. So, not only for that reason, but certainly that's a part of it. We've really the where we used to have maybe one annual conference before COVID. Now I guess we have four or five. And that has helped a lot. I mean, when you do some of these events, there is that kind of like buzz, for 30 days after, sort of people interested in advisory services, the survey data, and PSMJ Pro, and just ways to kind of capitalize on that momentum. So that's been huge. And honestly, I would say the last thing is just, we kind of joke sometimes internally that we're almost the private equity investor in young, smart talent. And we want to find people who just may not have a lot of experience, but have a lot of energy and hustle and curiosity, and just create a platform for them to explore. We had a great example of that was a summer intern this summer who was between his sophomore and junior year, who joined us as a financial advisory services intern in the merger and acquisition group. But quickly we realized, again, because of our open door meetings, we used to talk about digital natives. Well, now it's like AI natives, right? I mean, he's known nothing other than in his college career AI. He quickly became heavily involved in our little AI task force, which is kind of this enterprise-wide group. And wants to stay. He's off doing his semester in Italy now, but wants to stay involved in our monthly meetings. And that's a perfect example of just finding people and just getting out of their way, and letting them do their thing. Obviously, you have to put some guardrails around that, but uh, we just again try to really encourage ideas from everywhere. So I think that last part is just always looking for people who've got that spark and that curiosity, and giving them a place to shine.
Hmm. Well, that's
Great,
Ed, you just
thanks.
provided a perfect wrap up question, and
Yeah,
Greg nailed it with three answers. So that was like the kind of symmetry we aim
yeah,
for. And I when I set up this call with you, Greg, just to close out, what intrigued me was you did have those big successes that kind of parallel what the rest of us are doing. But in the midst of that, you were also nailing the traditional publishing model just to keep the lights on, kind of. So that's when I tried to come up with a title for this one, it was combining strategy and tactics. And I applaud what you did, and you got a much larger company as a result of that. So that's a good reminder to all of us. The old skills we have still come in handy when you need them.
Yeah, there was a quote I saw on LinkedIn or something the other day that said, if print were invented today, it would be the death of digital. And that's an example. So who knows? The paid newsletter might come back, and we want to be in front of it if it does. So yeah, some of those basic publishing things might be down for now, but maybe not down for good.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I could guarantee that PSMJ will be doing it before the rest of us. So keep
I know.
it
Well,
keep it up,
that's the
Greg.
the draft. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds good. Okay, well, once again, thanks everyone for listening in. Greg, thanks for sharing, and congratulations as usual. Really, congratulations to all of us who are figuring out this ever evolving universe. I'll close by saying I won't even bother going through the stuff that Renewed has coming up in the next 30 days or so, but I would just say, please click off and just go look at the calendar to make sure you're not missing anything, because we're doing a lot of programming, and including in the UK. Obviously, there's a ton going on over there too. So on both sides. So I look forward to seeing all of you soon. Always a privilege to spend time sharing successes, and everybody have a good beginning of the fall.
Sounds good. Thanks, David.
Yep. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.